Have you ever wondered, is Thor the only Marvel hero powerful enough to truly defeat Dr. Doom? That question has been circling in my mind ever since rumors started floating around about Avengers Doomsday and the larger multiverse saga. Because the more I piece together the comics, the leaks, and Marvel's pattern of storytelling, the more I start to believe that Thor isn't just another Avenger standing in the crowd during this fight. He might actually be the Avenger who changes everything. And I don't mean the Thor we already know. I'm talking about his most epic, most terrifying, most godlike version, the ruined King Thor. A version of him who rises only after immense loss, unimaginable grief, and the burning need to protect all creation itself. So today, I'm gonna break this all down. Not just who Thor becomes, but why only he can stand toe-to-toe with Dr. Doom, how Loki's role fits into this, and what this means for Marvel's plan leading into Secret Wars. Trust me, this isn't just some wild what-if scenario. The signs are there if you look closely enough. And by the end of this breakdown, I think you'll see what I see, that Thor's journey is leading him to the most defining moment of his character's history. Welcome to Movie Cast. My name is Liam Harrison, your host. And today, we're diving into the theory of why only Thor can beat Dr. Doom in the multiverse saga. This isn't just about powers or flashy fights. This is about storytelling, emotional payoff, and Marvel building toward a conclusion that echoes what they've done before while still shocking us in brand new ways. Let's get into it. When we think about Thor, most people go back to that moment in Infinity War when he stormed into Wakanda. The way the Bifrost tore open the sky, the lightning crashing down, and Thor wielding Stormbreaker just obliterating armies in seconds. That was peak Thor for a lot of fans, right? But what if I told you that scene was barely scratching the surface of what Thor is capable of? That's why when I started looking into the possibility of him becoming ruined King Thor, I realized Marvel had been planting seeds for years. See, the Thor we saw in Wakanda was powerful, yes. But that was still a Thor burdened with self-doubt, weighed down by mistakes, and carrying the scars of loss. Ruined King Thor is born from those scars. He's not just the god of thunder anymore. He's the god of ruin. A being who has embraced the full destructive power of Asgardian heritage while also carrying the wisdom of everything he's lost. That's why he's the only one who could realistically challenge Doom on equal terms. And Doom. Well, Doom isn't just some flashy villain. He's a strategist, a manipulator. And when the multiverse comes into play, he becomes something so much bigger. In the comics, Doom with the powers of the Beyonders is basically a god. He doesn't fight fair. He doesn't just swing punches or throw energy blasts. He rewrites existence to fit his vision. And the only way to fight that level of power is with something equally divine but grounded in emotion. That's where Thor comes in. Because Thor doesn't just swing a hammer. His entire character is built around the cycle of losing and rising stronger. Every loss fuels him. Every defeat transforms him. That's the core of why only he could be Marvel's answer to Doom in the multiverse saga. Now, one of the key things I've noticed in leaks and discussions about Avengers Doomsday is how central Loki's role might be. Loki has been reshaped massively thanks to his solo series, right? By the end of season 2, he's literally holding the threads of the multiverse together, becoming this almost mythical figure, like the keeper of time itself. But here's where my theory kicks in. What if Loki's final sacrifice is the trigger that awakens Thor's ruined king form? Imagine Doom storming the TVA, dismantling it piece by piece, and eventually dethroning Loki in the most brutal fashion. Loki, in one last act of love for his brother and duty to the multiverse, sacrifices himself, maybe even destroying the TVA itself to stop Doom from using it as his weapon. And right there, in that moment of devastation, Thor finds his brother, broken and breathing his last. That scene would be devastating. But it's exactly the kind of emotional hammer Marvel loves to swing at its audience. Think about Tony's death in Endgame. Think about Natasha on Vormir. Think about Wanda losing Vision again and again. Marvel thrives on those brutal, painful turning points. Loki's death here wouldn't just be another character exit, it would be the final piece of Thor's transformation. The grief, the rage, the desperate need to honor his brother's sacrifice. That's what pushes Thor into becoming ruined King Thor. And Doom? Doom would flee, because he would know he's awakened something far more dangerous than he anticipated. I keep circling back to the idea that Marvel is deliberately setting Thor up for something massive between Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. If reports are true, Thor has the second most screen time in Doomsday after Doom himself. That alone tells us Marvel wants Thor front and center. He's not just background noise anymore. He's the spine of this story. And when Doomsday ends with Loki's sacrifice and Thor's transformation, that cliffhanger is going to carry directly into Thor 5. Yes, you heard me. Thor 5. Not a team-up movie, not a side quest, but a full, standalone film that bridges the gap between Doomsday and Secret Wars. That movie, in my eyes, will be Thor's odyssey to find Doom, a revenge quest, a chase through the ruins of shattered universes. And every step of the way, Thor becomes more and more like the Ruined King. And let's not forget, Marvel is not afraid to go dark with Thor anymore. After Love and Thunder divided fans, I think Marvel knows they need to swing hard in the opposite direction. This isn't about jokes or slapstick anymore. This is about building Thor into the tragic, mythic figure he was always meant to be. Because when we finally arrive at Secret Wars and Thor stands as the last god left to face Doom, the impact will be astronomical. And honestly, I think Thor might sacrifice himself in Secret Wars. Just like Tony did in Endgame, Thor giving his life could be the perfect send-off, especially if Marvel really is planning a reboot of the MCU afterward. Thor's death would be the fire that closes this entire chapter of Marvel storytelling. So why do I say only Thor can beat Doom? Because Doom isn't just about raw power. Doom represents control, calculation, intellect on a cosmic scale. Most heroes would crumble under that. But Thor in his ultimate form doesn't fight with intellect alone. He fights with godly fury mixed with human emotion. He fights for love, for family, for redemption. Doom can outthink Tony Stark. He can manipulate Stephen Strange. He can even bend entire realities to his will. But what he can't do is calculate grief. He can't strategize against someone who has lost everything and still refuses to break. That's why Thor, and only Thor, can be Doom's true equal. And Marvel knows it. That's why they're slowly steering his story in that direction. When I start imagining what Thor 5 could look like, especially if it really does serve as the bridge between Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, I can't help but see it as one of the darkest solo films Marvel has ever made. Think about it. This would not be the Thor of colorful banter and lighthearted jokes anymore. This would be the Thor who has just held his dying brother in his arms, who has seen Doom escape into the shadows, and who realizes that the multiverse has just lost its protector in Loki. That's the moment where the real quest begins. Thor 5, in my eyes, won't just be another cosmic road trip. It'll be a vengeance saga, a journey across shattered realms, with Thor chasing the trail of Dr. Doom like a hunter chasing the most dangerous prey imaginable. And every step of the way, Thor is changing. He's shedding the last remnants of who he once was, and we start to see more of the Ruined King surface. His storms are darker, his temper is shorter, and his sense of destiny grows heavier with each passing moment. Now here's what fascinates me. Marvel has the perfect opportunity to weave myth and cosmic storytelling into Thor 5. Remember how the original Thor movie leaned into Norse mythology but only scratched the surface? This is the moment where they could go all in. Because Thor chasing Doom isn't just about traveling to other planets, it's about traversing different layers of reality itself. Imagine Thor journeying into realms we've never seen before, places where the fabric of time is warped, where the ruins of destroyed universes float like cosmic graveyards. And at every stop, Thor sees the devastation Doom has left behind. That's what will make Thor's vengeance personal. It's not just about Loki anymore. It's about all the lives and all the worlds Doom is willing to erase for his control. Thor's mission becomes both vengeance and justice. And the more destruction he witnesses, the more he realizes that he cannot afford to fight Doom as the Thor he's always been. He needs to embrace the darker, more terrifying version of himself, the Ruin King, if he's going to have any chance of ending this. The other key element I can't stop thinking about is how Marvel could use Thor 5 to pull threads from both the cosmic side of the MCU and the multiverse storyline. For example, what if Thor encounters the surviving fragments of heroes or villains from collapsed realities? That's a goldmine for storytelling. Imagine him finding a version of an Avenger who watched their Earth fall to Doom's schemes. Maybe even a variant of someone like Strange, who could serve as a grim warning about what Doom is capable of. Or even more chilling, what if Thor finds a version of himself who failed? A broken and defeated Thor variant, showing him what happens if he doesn't fully accept the mantle of Ruin King. Those encounters would not only fuel Thor's transformation, but also make it crystal clear to the audience that this isn't just a personal vendetta, it's a cosmic necessity. The multiverse itself depends on Thor becoming strong enough to end Doom. And here's where I think Marvel could really hit fans emotionally, by tying the memories of Loki back into Thor's journey. Even though Loki has died in Doomsday, his presence can linger in Thor's mind. I picture Thor carrying moments of their brotherhood as guiding stars on this journey. Maybe he hears Loki's voice in flashes of memory, or he reflects on the times when Loki was both his greatest enemy and his greatest ally. Those echoes of Loki would make Thor's mission bittersweet. It's not just vengeance, it's the desire to honor his brother's final sacrifice. And that, to me, is what makes the idea of Ruin King Thor so powerful. He's not just a god with new powers. He's a god whose very essence is shaped by grief, loss, and the desperate hope to honor someone he loved. I also can't ignore the reports that Marvel wants Thor to be a central pillar in both Doomsday and Secret Wars. If that's true, then Thor 5 becomes the natural place to show him stepping fully into the role of the key Avenger. Think back to how Marvel built Tony Stark before Endgame. We watched him evolve from selfish playboy to mentor, to family man, and ultimately to the one who would sacrifice himself to save everything. Thor needs that same level of narrative weight. Thor 5 is where Marvel could make us feel the inevitability of Thor's final stand in Secret Wars. We'd watch him gather strength, forge alliances across broken universes, and slowly but surely realize that his path doesn't end with killing Doom. It ends with giving his life to make sure Doom never rises again. And the crazy part is, I don't think Thor himself will realize that until the very end. That's what makes it so tragic. We, the audience, will start to see it coming, but Thor will be blinded by his need for vengeance until the very last moment. Another fascinating angle here is the possibility of Thor wielding a new weapon or even reforging his bond with Mjolnir and Stormbreaker in ways we haven't seen before. If he truly becomes the Ruin King, then his weapons themselves need to reflect that transformation. We know Marvel loves their big weapon reveals. Stormbreaker was hyped like crazy in Infinity War, and the broken Mjolnir returning in Love and Thunder was a huge moment. Imagine the sheer hype if Thor reforges his arsenal into something that reflects his darker, godlike Ruin King persona. Not just tools of battle anymore, but symbols of grief and ruin, powered by the storms of destruction themselves. That's the kind of visual Marvel would want to carry into Secret Wars. But let's dig deeper into why Dr. Doom is the perfect antagonist for this evolution of Thor. Doom is not just about strength. Doom is about inevitability. He's the kind of villain who always seems 3 steps ahead, who manipulates events so that even when you think you've won, you realize you've only played into his hands. That kind of villain forces a hero to dig deeper than ever before. Doom challenges heroes not on the battlefield alone, but in their very sense of self. And that's why Thor is the only Avenger who makes sense to oppose him. Thor is one of the few characters who can match Doom's godlike scale, but more importantly, Thor has the resilience to keep rising no matter how many times he's broken. Where others might bend under Doom's control, Thor only becomes sharper. Every loss carves him into something stronger. And that resilience, that unbreakable will, is the one thing Doom can't manipulate or outthink. So when I picture Thor 5 building toward its climax, I don't imagine Doom being fully defeated there. That wouldn't make sense. Doom is too big of a villain to be beaten before Secret Wars. Instead, I see Thor 5 ending with Thor embracing the full mantle of Ruin King, ready to take the fight to Doom in the ultimate showdown. The final shot of Thor 5 could be him standing at the edge of a crumbling universe, storms swirling around him, vowing to end Doom once and for all. That would set the stage perfectly for Secret Wars, where Thor steps into his destiny as the only one capable of standing toe-to-toe with Doom in the final battle. And here's something I've been wrestling with as I develop this theory. Will Marvel actually go through with Thor's death in Secret Wars? Because if Thor 5 is his transformation film and Secret Wars is his sacrificial finale, then we're talking about Thor getting the in-game treatment that Tony Stark had. That's a bold move. But it also feels inevitable if Marvel really is planning a reboot after Secret Wars. What better way to close out Thor's arc than to have him sacrifice himself the way Tony did, only on a cosmic, multiversal scale? His death would honor Loki, honor Asgard, and ultimately ensure that Doom can never rise again. It would also allow Marvel to reboot with a clean slate, knowing that the original Avengers have had their arcs completed. And honestly, if anyone deserves that kind of mythic, tragic ending, it's Thor. He's always been the most godlike Avenger, and gods in mythology rarely get happy endings. They get legendary ones. That's why I keep saying only Thor can beat Doom. Not just because of power, not just because of his weapons, but because his entire story has been building toward this point. From his arrogance in the first film, to his humility in Ragnarok, to his failure in Infinity War, to his grief in Endgame, and finally to his brotherhood with Loki, every single beat has been shaping him for this one destiny. Ruin King Thor versus Dr. Doom. A god born from ruin versus a man who wants to control all ruin. That's the clash the multiverse saga is heading toward, and it's going to be the most epic showdown Marvel has ever put on screen. As I push this theory further into the stage of Avengers Secret Wars, the first thing I think about is how Dr. Doom takes center stage as the godlike ruler of reality itself. In the comics, Secret Wars paints Doom as not just a villain, but as a literal god, reshaping the multiverse into Battleworld, ruling it as though he's untouchable. And if Marvel adapts that idea even loosely, then it means we're gonna see Doom at his absolute peak, more powerful than Thanos ever was, and more dangerous than Kang could have been. That makes him the final boss of the multiverse saga. But here's the key question. How do you even fight someone who's essentially omnipotent? That's where Thor's arc becomes critical. While the Avengers as a team will still exist in Secret Wars, I genuinely think they'll be operating around Thor's final confrontation with Doom. He's the one character who embodies the mythic, larger-than-life weight needed to stand against a god. Because Doom with god powers isn't just an enemy you punch harder than usual, he's an enemy you must match on a mythic, emotional, and cosmic scale. And Thor, especially as Ruin King Thor, is the only one who fits that mold. Now, if I look at how Marvel might structure Secret Wars, I see it unfolding in layers. First, the heroes will come together from across the multiverse. This is where all the rumors of returning Spider-Man, Fox X-Men, and even past MCU characters could pay off. But make no mistake, those cameos are going to be exciting, but not the spine of the story. They'll be there to create the sense of epic scale, to remind us this is the culmination of every Marvel universe. However, just like Infinity War and Endgame, Marvel will still need a central emotional thread. And that thread won't belong to Peter Parker or Doctor Strange. It'll belong to Thor. The multiverse may gather its champions, but Thor's fight against Doom will define the outcome. His grief, his vengeance, and ultimately his willingness to sacrifice everything, that's the through line audiences will cling to. Another crucial point here is how Doom could shatter the morale of the heroes before Thor finally rises to challenge him. Doom with godlike powers could manipulate reality to pit allies against each other, strip away their hope, and even rewrite history in ways that make the Avengers question their very existence. That's terrifying. But it also sets up Thor as the one who refuses to bend. Think about it. Thor has already lost Asgard. He's already lost his family, and by this point, he's lost Loki for good. Doom could try to tempt Thor by resurrecting visions of those he's lost, offering him false happiness in exchange for surrender, but Thor would know better. That temptation would only fuel him further, because the real Loki died a hero, and Thor wouldn't let Doom twist that memory into something corrupted. That's what makes Thor uniquely suited for this fight. He has nothing left for Doom to dangle in front of him. His only focus is the mission, and his only drive is honoring what's been lost. And this is where I think the mythology of Thor becoming the Ruined King will explode into full cinematic glory. By the time we reach the midpoint of Secret Wars, I imagine Thor fully embracing his Ruined King powers, not as a slow evolution anymore, but as a cataclysmic transformation in battle. The storms would be darker than we've ever seen. His presence alone could shatter armies, and his wrath would shake the foundation of Doom's so-called perfect world. Other heroes may still be fighting alongside him, but the visual focus will be Thor versus Doom, two godlike forces colliding while reality itself trembles. And the heartbreaking part is that even as Thor stands tall, we'll start to sense the cost. Every moment he fights Doom, it's burning him from the inside. The power of the Ruined King isn't something that can exist forever. It's destructive by nature. And that's where Marvel starts to foreshadow Thor's final sacrifice. I also believe that Marvel will use Secret Wars to tie together the emotional payoffs of other heroes, but those arcs will orbit around Thor's central clash. For example, maybe Spider-Man, whichever version gets the most spotlight, delivers the hope and resilience that rallies the smaller scale heroes. Maybe Strange provides the knowledge of how Doom's power actually works, helping set up the strategy. And maybe the Fantastic Four arrive to underline Doom's history, showing us why he's the ultimate villain. But when it comes to actually facing Doom head-on, it won't be Strange. It won't be Reed Richards. It won't be Peter. It'll be Thor, wielding all the ruinous fury of a god who has nothing left to lose. That's the storytelling core here. Doom is intellect and control. Thor is grief and destruction. Their collision is the thematic heart of Secret Wars. What excites me the most is imagining the emotional beats Marvel could layer into Thor's final moments. Imagine if during the battle, Thor has visions of Loki again. Not as Doom's manipulation this time, but as genuine glimpses of Loki's sacrifice guiding him. Perhaps Thor even hears Loki's voice one last time, reminding him that the multiverse must be protected at all costs. That could be the spark that pushes Thor to go beyond even the Ruined King, burning the last of his life force to strike Doom down. And the beauty of that moment would be its parallel to Tony in Endgame. Tony's sacrifice was grounded in his humanity. He was just a man in a suit, choosing to save the universe by outsmarting Thanos. Thor's sacrifice, on the other hand, would be mythic. He's a god, unleashing the totality of his ruinous power to obliterate Doom, knowing full well it will consume him in the process. Two completely different characters, but both sacrifices would close their arcs in a way that resonates across the saga. Another fascinating element that I think Marvel might lean into is the concept of legacy. If Thor dies in Secret Wars, who carries on his mantle? We know Marvel has been experimenting with passing torches, Sam as Captain America, Kate Bishop as Hawkeye, and so on. But Thor's mantle is unique because it's not just about a weapon, it's about godhood. Jane briefly carried Mjolnir, but her story is already concluded. Could we see Marvel position a new character to rise after Thor? Maybe someone like Beta Ray Bill finally introduced into the MCU, or even a completely fresh take on what it means to wield Asgardian power. That's a question for post-Secret Wars, but it adds weight to Thor's sacrifice. His death wouldn't be the end of Asgardian legacy. It would be the torch-passing moment that allows Marvel to reboot the MCU while still honoring what came before. And let's not forget how Doom's defeat itself could shape the reboot. If Thor sacrifices himself to destroy Doom, it could be framed as a reset button for the entire multiverse. His final act could shatter Doom's control and allow the multiverse to be reborn, fresh universes, new heroes, and a clean slate for Marvel to build Phase 7 and beyond. That's why Thor's role is so central. It's not just about beating Doom in the moment. It's about ending the saga in a way that allows Marvel to tell new stories. Thor's death could literally be the narrative and symbolic reset of the MCU. When I think about the fan reaction to all this, it gives me chills. Thor has always been one of the most beloved Avengers, but he's also been one of the most inconsistent in terms of tone. Some fans loved Ragnarok, others hated Love and Thunder. But by giving Thor this mythic, tragic arc, Marvel would silence all debates. Everyone would walk out of the theater agreeing that Thor was given the ending he deserved. Just like Endgame made Tony Stark untouchable in terms of legacy, Secret Wars would immortalize Thor as the god who gave everything. And in the years to come, fans would look back at Thor not as the comic relief or the inconsistent hero, but as the spine of the multiverse saga. That's the legacy Marvel could carve with this storyline. So when I say only Thor can beat Dr. Doom, I don't mean it as a fun power scaling debate. I mean it as the emotional, mythic truth of where Marvel is heading. Thor versus Doom is not just a fight, it's the culmination of everything Marvel has built since the beginning. And I firmly believe that's how Secret Wars will be remembered. The saga where Thor became the ruined king, gave his life, and changed the multiverse forever. When I picture the fallout of Thor's battle with Dr. Doom, the first thing that strikes me is just how devastating the battlefield of Secret Wars will look. By this stage in the movie, we're not talking about the ruins of a city or the wreckage of a planet. We're talking about the bones of reality itself. Whole universes crumbling like glass, timelines collapsing into ash, and Doom standing at the center like a god who believes he's untouchable. That's the backdrop where Thor makes his final stand. And once the dust settles, after Thor's sacrifice has broken Doom's control, I think we'll be left with one of the most haunting yet inspiring aftermaths in Marvel history. Because the point of Thor's sacrifice isn't just victory, it's transformation. The multiverse itself will change because of what he does. The heroes who survive will walk away not only alive but forever altered by the fact that they witnessed a god give everything to preserve existence. This is where I think Marvel will use Thor's sacrifice as a rallying point for the other Avengers. Think about how Tony's death united the MCU in Endgame. His funeral scene wasn't just about grief, it was about passing the torch. Everyone who had fought alongside him felt the weight of his sacrifice and carried that into the next era of storytelling. Thor's death, though, will feel even bigger because of the scale. He won't just save one universe, he'll save all universes. That makes his sacrifice not just a turning point for the Avengers, but for every single version of every hero across the multiverse. Imagine Spider-Man from different realities standing in silence. Imagine mutant heroes bowing their heads. Imagine Strange acknowledging that Thor did what no spell or strategy ever could. That's the emotional climax Marvel has the chance to deliver, an ending that unites not just characters, but fans themselves in awe. But the real beauty here is in how Marvel can use this ending to tie up the arcs of secondary characters. For example, Loki's presence will still linger heavily, even though he won't physically return. The audience will remember that this all started with Loki's sacrifice in Doomsday. In a way, Loki and Thor's arcs are fused together here. Brothers who once fought each other endlessly, both ultimately giving their lives to save the multiverse. That symmetry is powerful. Loki dies holding back Doom's initial strike. Thor dies striking the final blow. Two brothers who spent their entire existence in conflict end their journeys in perfect balance. Both heroes, both sacrifices, both remembered as the pillars of the multiverse saga. That kind of storytelling symmetry is exactly what makes Marvel so satisfying when they're firing on all cylinders. And let's not forget the other heroes. This is where we could see Doctor Strange stepping into his next evolution, acknowledging that even his vast knowledge had limits, and perhaps realizing he now has to become the new protector of the multiverse in Thor's absence. Maybe Peter Parker learns from Thor's sacrifice the same way he learned from Tony's, that being a hero isn't about winning every fight, but about being willing to give everything when the moment demands it. Maybe characters like Reed Richards, introduced as part of the Fantastic Four, walk away realizing that Doom's defeat wasn't about intellect, but about heart. That's the kind of lesson that can shape entire new phases of Marvel storytelling. I also think Marvel will seize the opportunity here to create a true sense of finality before the reboot. When Thor falls and Doom is finally defeated, we'll need a moment of stillness. Not a rushed epilogue, not a quick on to the next adventure, but a true pause, a moment that acknowledges the weight of everything we've just seen. Think about the quiet funeral in Endgame. Now scale that up to the multiverse itself. I imagine a scene where the surviving heroes, pulled from countless realities, gather to honor Thor. Maybe they build a monument in the ruins of Battleworld. Maybe they speak his name across the skies of newly reborn universes. Maybe they vow never to forget that it was Thor, the god of thunder, who gave his life so they could exist. That would be Marvel's way of giving closure not just to Thor, but to the entire infinity to multiverse saga arc. And here's where I think the reboot threads start to weave in. Because Thor's sacrifice doesn't just end Doom, it resets the multiverse itself. Out of the destruction comes creation. That gives Marvel the perfect opportunity to reshape its entire cinematic universe. New realities can be born with slightly altered histories. Familiar characters can return with fresh starts. And the MCU can move forward with a clean slate without disrespecting what came before. In fact, the reboot would feel earned, because it would come from the most mythic, emotional sacrifice imaginable. Thor's death wouldn't just reset the multiverse in story, it would reset Marvel's storytelling in reality. Now, I know a lot of people are wondering how Marvel can make Doom's defeat feel satisfying without undermining him. After all, if Doom is hyped as the ultimate villain, his downfall has to feel believable yet tragic in its own way. That's why Thor is the perfect choice. If Doom lost to intellect, it would feel cheap. If Strange outsmarted him or Reed Richards tricked him, Doom's image as the ultimate strategist would crumble. But if Doom loses to Thor, a god consumed by ruin, wielding raw emotion and unstoppable destruction, then Doom's defeat feels inevitable yet poetic. Doom could argue he calculated everything, but he couldn't calculate Thor's heart. That's a loss that doesn't make Doom look weak. It makes Thor look unstoppable. It honors both characters simultaneously, which is the hallmark of great storytelling. And honestly, Doom's story doesn't even have to end entirely. Even after Thor's sacrifice, Marvel could leave the door open for Doom to return in some form in the reboot. Maybe his essence survives in fragments across the multiverse. Maybe his legend becomes the shadow hanging over future stories. That's the beauty of Doom as a villain. He's too iconic to waste, but his first true defeat has to come from Thor to cement the importance of this saga. What's really fascinating is how Thor's death could reverberate into the MCU's future projects. If Marvel truly reboots, the echoes of Thor might still remain as myths or legends in the new continuity. Imagine future heroes referencing the god who once gave his life to save everything, even if the details are hazy or forgotten. Thor's presence would still haunt the new MCU, just as Tony's sacrifice echoes even in the projects that came after Endgame. That's how you create not just an ending but a legacy. And let's not overlook the emotional impact on fans. For over a decade, audiences have followed Thor's journey. We've laughed with him, cried with him, and sometimes scratched our heads at the tonal shifts in his movies. But to end his arc with a sacrifice this mythic would retroactively elevate everything that came before. Even the divisive films would feel like stepping stones leading to this grand finale. Fans who once questioned Thor's direction would walk away saying it was all worth it. This is what it was leading to. That's the kind of emotional payoff Marvel needs right now, especially after a few years of criticism about their direction. I can't shake the image of Thor's sacrifice standing as the final myth in the MCU as we know it. Imagine the last act of Secret Wars playing out not as a standard superhero battle, but as a legend being written before our eyes. Doom in his towering godlike form has reshaped reality itself, bending the rules of existence to his will. Every hero across every corner of the multiverse has fought to stand against him, but it all comes down to one figure, Thor. No longer just the god of thunder, but the ruined king, embodying every storm, every loss, every heartbreak he has endured. His final strike against Doom isn't just a blow of strength, it's a strike of destiny. In that moment, Thor becomes more than a character. He becomes myth. He becomes the story future universes will whisper about, the god who gave everything to bring balance back to the multiverse. And this is why I believe Marvel will frame Thor's death as both heartbreaking and triumphant. Unlike Tony, whose sacrifice felt like the closing of a human journey, Thor's sacrifice will feel mythological, almost biblical in scale. He doesn't just save the day, he reshapes creation. And when the storm clears, the multiverse itself is reborn. Universes untangle, realities reform, and what was once corrupted by Doom's control becomes fresh and whole again. This gives Marvel the perfect opportunity to reboot. Because instead of saying, we're starting over for creative reasons, they can say, Thor's sacrifice reset existence itself. That feels earned. That feels like storytelling. And for fans, it'll feel like a moment of catharsis, painful, yes, but also deeply satisfying. Now, how does Marvel use this to set up the next era? I think the answer lies in subtlety. When the multiverse resets, not every detail will be explained. Some characters may survive into the new reality, some may vanish, and some may reappear in altered forms. That's the magic of a reset. You can keep what works, change what doesn't, and still have it feel natural, because the story itself explains why. Maybe Spider-Man exists in the new reality but has a slightly different history. Maybe the X-Men are part of this new universe from the start, no longer requiring complicated explanations. Maybe characters like Reed Richards or Sue Storm are established heroes already. All of it makes sense because Thor's sacrifice didn't just save the multiverse, it redefined it. And from Marvel's perspective, that's exactly the kind of creative freedom they need to keep going for another decade. But for me, the real emotional anchor is this. Even if the details change, Thor's story won't be forgotten. In-universe heroes may remember him as a myth or a faint legend, the god who ended doom. Out of universe, fans will carry his memory forever. And that's how Marvel ensures that this isn't just an ending, it's a transition. Thor becomes the bridge between the MCU we've known and whatever comes next. His story closes one book and opens another, all with one final sacrifice. There's another layer here that I think makes Thor's death resonate even more. The Brotherhood with Loki. If Loki sacrifices himself in Doomsday and Thor follows in Secret Wars, then Marvel will have crafted one of the most poetic dual arcs in the entire MCU. These brothers, once sworn enemies, once defined by betrayal, both end their stories as heroes who gave everything. That kind of symmetry will make the multiverse saga feel like a complete tapestry, not just a scattered set of movies. Fans will look back at Thor 2011, at the Avengers 2012, at Ragnarok, and see not just random conflicts, but the setup of a mythic tragedy. Loki gave his life to stop Doom from taking control. Thor gave his life to end Doom's reign. Together, they saved everything. That's the kind of story that will echo long after the credits roll. And Marvel knows the power of that kind of storytelling. They've done it before. Steve Rogers closing his arc with Peggy. Tony Stark with his final I Am Iron Man. Natasha with her choice on Vormir. But Thor and Loki together? That hits differently. That hits like a saga that was always meant to end this way. Of course, I don't think every thread will be tied neatly. Marvel has always liked leaving doors cracked open for the future. But the major beats, Doom's fall, Thor's sacrifice, Loki's remembered heroism, those will close. And honestly, they should. Fans need closure to feel like this massive multiverse saga had weight. But what happens after that? That's where the reboot can play with possibilities. Imagine new Avengers rising in a world that's slightly different. Imagine X-Men leading the charge in this new continuity. Imagine Fantastic Four being central instead of late arrivals. All of this will be possible because Thor gave his life to allow the story to continue. And for me personally, I think that's the most fitting way to honor Thor's character. He started as the arrogant prince who thought the world revolved around him. He grew into the reluctant hero, the grieving survivor, the broken man who struggled with failure. And in the end, he becomes the god who gave everything, not for himself, not for glory, but for everyone else. That's growth. That's completion. That's why I think Thor's sacrifice won't just be a story beat, it'll be the crown jewel of Marvel's storytelling. What excites me even more is the reaction I imagine fans will have. People will cry, of course. People will cheer. But most importantly, people will feel closure. After years of questioning Marvel's direction, after debates about tone and quality, Thor's ending could unite the fandom in agreement. This is why we watch. And that's what Marvel needs right now more than anything. A unifying moment that reminds us of the stakes, the heart, and the mythic scope that made us fall in love with this universe in the first place. And let's be honest, Chris Hemsworth deserves it. He's carried this role for over a decade, through highs and lows, through blockbusters and experiments. Giving him an ending this grand would be the ultimate thank you to both him and the fans who followed him. And while it will hurt to say goodbye, it will also feel right. Because gods don't fade quietly. Gods in legend. So when the credits finally roll on Secret Wars and Thor is gone, I think Marvel will leave us with one last image. Maybe a new dawn breaking over the reborn multiverse. Maybe a simple shot of Mjolnir resting in the ruins, a symbol of what was lost. Maybe even a glimpse of a new generation rising in his shadow. Whatever it is, it will leave fans in awe. And that's the power of this theory, that only Thor, not Strange, not Reed, not Peter, can truly end Doom's reign. Only Thor has the mythic weight, the emotional anchor, and the narrative destiny to be the key. And that's why I've said it from the very start. Only Thor can beat Dr. Doom. Not because he's the strongest Avenger, not because he's the funniest, not because of his hammer, but because his story has been building toward this mythic ending since the very beginning. He's the God who failed, the God who grieved, and finally, the God who gave everything. Doom may rewrite reality, but Thor rewrites destiny. That's how this saga ends. Thank you all so much for sticking with me through this breakdown. I know this theory was massive, and I poured everything into explaining why I believe Thor's journey has been leading to this moment. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like the video, subscribe to MovieCast, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And now, YouTube has a brand new feature called the Hype option. It's completely free, and it helps push our videos further so more fans can join the discussion. Give this video some hype if you want to show support. And if you'd like to support our work directly, you can also consider using the Super Thanks option. We recommend the $20 tier if you really want to give us a big boost. Every bit of support keeps us going, and I can't thank you enough for being part of this journey. I'm Liam Harrison, this is MovieCast, and I'll see you all in the next one.